much for joining today, our summit. I'm really thrilled to welcome as our guest, Erin Zaikis. Hey, Erin, how are
Hey,
you?
Paula. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
This is a thrill. Erin is such a dear friend and someone I've looked up to for years, and I know she's going to have a lot to share with us. Let me just tell you all a little bit about her. She is the founder of Sundara, a nonprofit, which she'll tell us all about in a second. She was raised in Massachusetts and graduated from the University of Michigan's Gerald Ford School of Public Policy. But she's lived all over the world, India, Thailand, Israel, and New York. And that's where we're finding her today on the Upper West Side. She loves all sorts of interesting passions and hobbies. She especially likes Asian desserts, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
Um, and she's a huge advocate for women. She's a Forbes 30 under 30, and she's been recognized by the Huffington Post, One, CNN, BBC, and the Clean India campaign. And she's spoken all over the world. And it's a joy to have you. And let's dive in.
Thank you so much.
So tell us about Sundara. You're the best person to describe it to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, Sundara means beautiful in Sanskrit. I get asked that question all the time. Some people think that my name is Sundara, but no, it
Mhm.
means beautiful in Sanskrit, and it really honors what I think is beautiful. These days we're pumped with images, especially as women, about what a beautiful woman looks like. But I really wanted to focus on what a beautiful woman is. And so it all comes from an experience that I had when I was 23. I was living on the border of Thailand and Myanmar, and I was working with children who were either survivors of sex trafficking or likely to be trafficked. And as you can imagine, just very depressing, very hard work. And I was starting to feel disillusioned about such a big problem. And at the same time, I remember one day I went into one of the schools and I realized there's no hand soap. Um, and I thought to myself, that's something so simple. This is something I can do something about. And I bought a few bars of soap. I remember bringing it back to the school and I gave out these bars of soap to children who were 13 years old. And I watched kind of in horror as they opened the bars of soap and they tried to eat it, put it on their head, scratched it with their nails. And I thought, I had this light bulb moment when I realized that these children had lived their entire lives without something that is so basic and so simple and was so universal for me growing up in Boston that I never once thought about it. And I think, speaking for a lot of Americans, we just don't really think about something like soap. But the sad reality is that soap is not universal, and that there are 70 million people in India today who don't have access to soap, don't even know what it is. And because of that, children under 5 are dying of diarrhea, pneumonia, things that children here in the US and in Israel do not die of, fortunately. And it just felt really simple. It felt like here is a problem that I can actually do something about. I'm not a doctor. Um, I didn't have years of work experience, but I just saw a need. Um, I did a little research and I found out that the world has enough soap for 10 to 11 billion people. And it's really a problem of just not getting the waste to the need. And a lot of the waste is coming from the hospitality industry. So um, I pitched a competition that was sponsored by LinkedIn in 2013. And I said, what if we could find a way to recycle hotel soap and employ women and distribute it to people who are living on less than $1.25 a day? Um, and I won. I got a check for $10,000 and I booked a flight to India. And now it's 8 years later. And right before the pandemic, we had 43 employees with factories across India, in Burma, Myanmar, and in Uganda as well. I say that because 2020 was a very hard year for us as an organization. Um, and the hospitality industry was very hard hit. And there went a lot of our funding sources. It's also next to impossible to operate soap recycling factories in the midst of government lockdowns. And so we found ourselves in this kind of crisis mode where we asked ourselves, what's next? How do we operate in a virtual world? How do we carry this work forward? And everything started to come back to that moment that I won that competition with LinkedIn, and thinking that if not for that check and that external vote of confidence, I wouldn't have had the chutzpah to like take that flight to Mumbai and book an Airbnb and like really get to starting this. So, 8 years in, I've sort of been thinking, how can I support the next generation of female social entrepreneurs who are working in global health? And so we raised $125,000, and we made a social innovation fund, and we put out a call for women who have ideas to improve the health and hygiene and water of their communities. And yeah, we got applications from 54 countries, and we just announced our first 5 fellows from Armenia, Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, and India. And then we will be announcing 10 more this year, hopefully. And so all of that is to say that our organization is quickly changing, but I'm really excited about this new mission of female empowerment with global health and entrepreneurship.
I'm astounded. I mean, I knew all this, but to hear it and have you say it again is just, it gives me shivers. I think this summit, the point of this summit is really to discuss empowering women and helping women find their own voice and the power to shift and to change. So I would love if you walk us through those first moments, years, months for you. Um, you, you didn't have a degree in public health at the time.
Yeah.
You didn't have expertise in the hospitality industry. I mean, what gave you the courage to just kind of rise above and go for it?
Yeah. Looking back on it, I think I had the courage because I got to do the typical thing that most people who graduate get to do, which is have a 9 to 5 job. I had a job at a real estate company, and I was miserable. Um, I would come to work and just count down the minutes. I think the highlight of my day was eating like the free Chobani yogurts in the refrigerator. Um, and I would see these, people who worked with me who brought their sneakers to the office, and they had been in it for 20, 30 years. And I just thought, I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. Like, is this why I went to college? So I could help a rich man get richer and own more real estate. And I just felt my soul like crumbling in that office job. And so it was a miserable year. Um, and I kind of promised myself that I wouldn't do that to myself and that I deserved better and I needed to see what else there was out there. So in taking that risk and flying to India, and I only had a few $1,000s in my bank account, I was really flying by the seat of my pants. And I think that most entrepreneurs are, if they're really honest with themselves and with you, um, is this feeling of, holy crap, I am so lost. I don't know what I'm doing. But I do think that I am kind of an eternal optimist where I think that there are good people all over the world. And it's only a matter of putting your idea out there as much as you can and connecting with the right people to support you and seeing that it's going to resonate with other people and getting their buy-in and having their support. So I remember in the beginning, I would tell my doormen about what I was doing with Sundara. I would tell taxi drivers, I would tell waiters, and I highly doubt that they cared. But I think there's something very powerful about speaking your idea out there and really putting it into the world, because I think that you will have this sense of, maybe a false sense of accountability. Like, I doubt that any of those drivers really cared, but you also, you speak it and it becomes real. Um, and someone actually knows someone. And I got connected to my first hotel partner because of, a random Facebook message. And so I think that I would encourage people to just like, really take everything away and realize that everyone's lost and no one knows what they're doing. And and know that that's how it's going to feel for you, and still wake up and put one foot in front of the other anyways, and it's really a choice. And sometimes there's this expression like, if you knew how hard it was, you would have never started. um, and I think you'll have so many highs and lows, but just knowing that this experience is so rewarding compared to that office job where you feel yourself just kind of like lost and dead inside.
What about what happens when you meet a woman in Kenya or Armenia or India, and this is the first time anyone's believed in her, and maybe she lacks the education, lacks the infrastructure, doesn't have the role models. How do
Yeah.
you encourage her? What are the words you use? How do you bring her to that next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when we were thinking about Rise, we did some formal and informal surveys about why don't women in these countries pursue entrepreneurship at the rate that they do in a country like the US or Israel. And what we found was it was kind of threefold. It was um, that they didn't think it was a socially acceptable career path, which I can certainly resonate with as the daughter of a lawyer and a dentist, um, and that they didn't see people who looked like them in positions of power. The other was just access to capital and not feeling financially empowered. And I think that's one of the reasons why Rise grants $5,000 to each entrepreneur, because we really believe that if we're standing in solidarity with these women, that we need to make sure that they feel financially secure and that we give them money to actualize their dream. And then I think the third thing is imposter syndrome and self confidence and feeling like, who am I going to lean on if everything blows up? And so I think what I would tell someone like that is, even if it blows up, you will be so much richer for the experience that you have. Um, and ultimately, nothing lasts forever. I can build a super successful nonprofit one year, and the next year, a global pandemic can hit and
Right.
tear a lot of it down. And so, just kind of like detaching yourself from the end result is really important, and just doing it for the personal and professional challenge. I think that's a really important thing. Um, and then I think I would also tell them, why not? I, in spending 7 years in India, one thing that I saw is that people are by and large very overeducated and underemployed. We had a job posting for $300 a month for an administrative assistant, and we got people with 20 years of experience and PhDs and multiple master's degrees. And it was horrifying to think that someone wanted that job who was that well educated. And so we, um, we need to change the dynamic and have people like that feel like they are leaders and that they can be the architects of their own change. And that's why at Rise, we're trying to do something very holistic, where we take care of our fellows personally and professionally and provide them with coaching and provide them with funds and provide them with a safe space to just have honest conversations that they might not have with. Like India, we find that people are very overeducated and underemployed. And that started to really impact me and make me think, how do we make these people really be the architects of their own change and see
Yeah.
themselves as leaders? And so that's one of the reasons why, with Rise, we're really committed to creating that holistic experience for entrepreneurs, where we give them capital, we give them financial training, we give them a safe space where they can talk about fears and imposter syndrome and all the things that they might not socially get to speak about with their friends, or culturally be able to talk about that with their parents. And so we're trying to create leaders that can then go out and transform other leaders around them, because that is how I think the most effective change in global development is going to happen.
What I really am curious about too is each of us is the head of a female-led nonprofit, and the
Mhm.
majority of our employees are also female.
Yes.
And I'm really interested to hear how you think the way forward is with female entrepreneurs? What are the differences between perhaps a male-led or more masculine-led or more typical um, entrepreneur or a typical startup? And what are sort of like the best practices? What are the differences that you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, everyone that I hire is a woman, and I have had, by and large, phenomenal experiences working with women. I think women are so passionate and work harder and, dare I say, better than men, especially in the pandemic. I've seen such a difference with working with this incredible group of women that I get to work with every day. And I think that like bringing feminine energy to your leadership can be really game changing. I think women have very strong intuitions that can tell them when something is good or something's bad, or when an employee is having an off day or week, and sort of trusting that and getting to the root of that issue, because you just know that something's off. I think also, as a woman who's leading a group of women, um, I have started to do all the things that I wish I had a boss to do. So everyone on my team gets professional development money, and everyone gets their birthdays off, and everyone gets to say every month, here's what I'm happy with. Here's where my energy is. Here's where my energy is not. Here's what I hate doing. And it's a constant iterative process as we start to learn about what skills we're doing well and what we're not doing well. And I think the big thing with COVID is like, where is your energy right now?
Yeah.
Because given, we're all so stressed. I think it's February. We're all at our worst, myself included. It's like the dog days of winter. I haven't seen the sun, maybe except for today in a few weeks. And so I am always checking in with people about where their energy is, and if they need time off, if they need, you know, a week off or anything like that. I believe it's really important to treat your employees as friends, um,
Mhm.
and respect them and let them know that you are like their number one fan. And that even if they don't want to be at Sundara, I will go above and beyond to like look at my network and figure out how I can get this woman to like her next career move. And I think that's so important. We have to be each other's cheerleaders. I don't, I haven't had a lot of men who would do that for me. Maybe because they don't realize the importance of having that mentorship and having that connection. So I really want to do it. I'm certainly not perfect and have a ways to go, but constantly being open to feedback and trusting my intuition. I think that's the biggest thing.
It's interesting that you said that you treat your employees as friends because that is so frowned upon. I mean, and I have a tendency to do the same. Everyone that comes into my orbit, I feel like should be my friend for better
Yeah.
or worse.
Yeah.
But I think it's about acknowledging yourself and your own patterns and your own way of relating to other individuals. And so it has to be authentic. And if it's authentic to you to treat people as friends, then that has to be the way forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's on your bucket list? What's next?
It's so funny. I wrote this like epic bucket list for 2020, like go to Senegal and like learn another language. And so much of that has gone away. And um, like in a personal way, I'm someone who's really like run from my problems. Uh, for much of my life. I think that was my coping mechanism. And the pandemic really forced me to stay in one place, namely my 400 square foot studio, and realized that I couldn't really run from this. And I started to think about all the other things that I've run from. And I have invested a lot of time in therapy, thinking about my romantic relationships and my relationships with my parents and how that has played out in my professional life, because at the end of the day it's all connected. So I think that what's next for me is continuing this investment into myself. um, I've also started doing a lot of breath work, and sometimes I get very stressed out, and just reminding myself to come back to my breath has been very, very powerful. It sounds simple, but sometimes it's the only thing that calms the mental chatter. And I think what else is next is to not be afraid to upset people. I mean, before
Mm,
this, we were talking about a donor I have who just wrote me a very inappropriate email. And I think that last year I would have just stayed silent. And this year, I feel like I want to, say, you can't do that to me. And this is inappropriate. And I'm not standing for that. I think I have fallen into in the past of very much like a people pleasing mentality and not wanting to look mean and not wanting to come off aggressive or combative. But sometimes that behavior doesn't really serve me well. And sometimes I just want to put my foot down and take a stand for something. So I think that's also what's next. And I always remind myself like the goal is to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And
that
right now I'm staying with my sister and her husband. And so my brother-in-law has just started saying a lot like, what's on the other side of fear? Um, and at first I was like, more fear? And he's like, no, nothing. And I realized that life is a journey about pushing past the uncomfortable moments, being in the uncomfortable moments and being okay with it, pushing past those fears. And so just getting clear on that in more of like a myopic level as opposed to like a big grand global level.